Today is Thursday, June 23rd, and my name is Natalie Fritz, and I am sitting down with Marguerite Brinkman, and I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself, and you can, so.
Yes, I'm Marguerite Brinkman.
Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Oh, now that's difficult. I've lived in Springfield all my life. I have had, I haven't had a lot of jobs, come to think of that, except I consider being a housewife a job. But other than that, I have 2 children, and my husband, who died in 1986, was a school administrator, and I'm rambling. I've lived in the house that I live in now for over 60 years, which is very cluttered. No, I have interesting collections. And some of the happiest things that I've done in my life have been through volunteer work, because housewives are targets for volunteers and we love it or we wouldn't do it. And I think that the years that I've spent, especially here, are dear to my heart still. And I appreciate the time and the friends and the experience that I've gained, even at this time of my life, in something new that I hadn't ventured upon before.
I say we've loved having you. You've been with us for over 20 years before we even moved into the Heritage Center here, and you helped get a lot of our artifacts ready. So we appreciate all the knowledge that you've gained on our behalf and helped to better care for everything that we have.
Well, I'm sure it was more to my advantage than yours, but I enjoyed it very much.
So I know that you've been working up in the archives with me for a long time, and you and Ruth Stiles are always my go-to people for identifying any photos that we have of the area or telling any stories about downtown or anything like that. And that's how I knew your connection to Wrens, was when you guys would run across those pictures. You started telling me a little bit about your experiences then working with Wrens. So we wanted to get some of that recorded today. So I thought I'd start by asking you a few questions about your time there. So I'll start with, how did you get the job at Wrens?
Well, I started working at Wrens I remember this, in the summer of 1944, the year before my senior year in high school. But I didn't go display first. They sent me to the cosmetic counter, where actually was the toughest buyer at Wrens. Her name was Minnie Olschlager, and she ran a tight ship. But I don't think I was there very long. She selected her employees mostly, and I was transferred to the jewelry department, which was fun. These are both on the first floor. And somebody said that there was an opening in display department, and I thought that would be a lot more fun. I wasn't 16 yet, I was 15. And I thought it's more fun to be all over the store than to be in one place all the time. So I thought, sure. And so that was why I ended up in display, which I knew nothing about, and learned a lot.
Did you have to do a separate interview to get into the display department?
We hardly did interviews for employment then, as I remember, especially young kids, because most of it was part-time work and summer jobs, and it was, you're going to go to work in X department, and you went, and someone says, this is what you do, and you did your best. and that was what I did.
Who was your boss in display?
His name was Lawrence Kite, best man in the world, best man. And I really loved him. He was my mentor. And being the first female that he had in the department, they never had women working in display before that time. I think I was a question mark for him and maybe a lot of people, but it all worked out.
Can you tell me about the other people that you worked with in that department?
Mostly like me, a lot young people, high school and part-time mostly. Mr. Kite was, of course, a department manager, so he was there all the time. Also, Pat Malahy, who was an older man than Mr. Kite was, and he and Pat were working in the Wrens department store when it was on the corner of High and Limestone. So they kind of, when they made the move to the Bushnell building, they came with it.
So it had only, when you started working there, it had only been in the Bushnell building for about 5 years?
Not
even,
long,
yeah.
Not very long.
Because I think it moved in 39, I think.
Yes, and I remember Mr. Kite telling me stories about when they moved. This Wrens then, if there was Wrens on the corner, and it went clear down almost half a block on High Street. But when they moved out of the building, they bricked up half of it that was separate from what the whole Wrens store was. And Mr. Kite used to talk about them moving so quickly that they were throwing merchandise through the walls as they were bricking them up between the two stores. So I know that it came about pretty quickly that they didn't have time to do the planning that they should have. Yeah.
Well, it became Sears over there after that, didn't it?
Yeah. That's why they wanted a separate wall between what was the old Wrens and their store. So they had interesting stories to tell. And Pat Leahy did primarily the men's department windows. He very rarely worked over in the front windows, in the front of the store, and did all hand lettering of every sign that was in the window, did beautiful calligraphy work, and Mr. Kite was an artist too.
Did he do the lettering for all of the windows, regardless of, like, did they?
No, he did the men's window, and the women's side, the men's side and the women's side, but the fashion windows. We had a woman that came in, and that's all she did was make signs, but it was a mechanical machine that she used to make signs, but she made them all in store and for our windows.
So which windows were which on the building?
All of the windows on the Fountain Avenue side were menswear, and then there were no menswear on the Main Street side at all. They were, I'm trying to think, not even shoes. Nothing on the Main Street side that was.
So you worked on the Main Street side ones?
Yeah.
How many windows total were there?
On the Main Street, there were 12 windows different sizes. Two main fashion, they call them fashion windows, that were mostly women's wear, that were the two biggest windows in the display. So, but we had a corridor in between. As you came in the main entrance, there was a corridor. So there were windows surrounding that whole corridor.
Okay, so even if you were inside, there was windows you could see from the inside
Yes.
too? Okay.
Yeah, before you came in the store, but we're like around what would you call
Like
it?
an atrium kind
Yes,
of? Yeah.
sort of. Yeah.
So how often did you change the windows?
It was according to the departments and Mr. Kite and the advertising department, merchandising, what they felt was most important at the time. So but we sort of had windows that were primarily, this window always has merchandise from yard goods. We demonstrated or had in our windows yard goods that you unrolled and put on, big frames to, and that was a tough window. The only department manager that did their own display was the shoe department, and his name was Mr. Sheridan, and he came in and did windows, small windows on the end of the large fashion windows that were just shoes. And he didn't change them every week. It was, whenever he decided to.
It was really a weekly basis then, that pretty much?
The fashion windows always, where you put, what you thought that the public wanted to see, they were changed every week. But some would be in, like the book, we had a library in the store, and we had a section that they displayed their merchandise, and that would stay in sometimes longer than a week, a few. But the big windows in the front had to be changed every Friday because Saturday was the time people came downtown. Everybody came downtown. So you had to have fresh windows in on. So we all hated Fridays.
So, I want to back up to the library. Not a lot of people
Yes.
know that Wrens had a lending library.
They charged you. You paid like 5 cents. If you took a book out, you paid 5 cents. But the good part about it was they always had the brand new books. When they first came out, you could go there and get them and pay 5 cents a day and have them before the public library would have them. And the store was, the first floor is set up so that there was a balcony in the back, and the library was part of it, and the other part of it was a jewelry store. It was George Wisdom, who had a store here in this building for a while after he left, after Wrens closed. But they sold nice jewelry there. And in fact, my fiance bought my engagement ring there, and they gave him my 15% discount.
That was very nice of them.
Well, we thought 15% discount was a big deal.
Yeah, well, for an engagement ring, definitely.
Right.
So, what was a typical day like of work?
Oh, gee, that's tough. We had, I don't think there were typical days. No, there weren't, because the schedule was always up in the air as far as we were concerned, and sometimes you didn't know until you got there what you were going to do that day. And we had, there were a lot of the kids, I'm saying, they weren't all kids, but most of us were. We had some students from Wittenberg that came and worked. When we came in, we were just either saying, we're getting ready for the windows on the weekend that we had to do, because if we use props like, I don't know, steps or tables or anything that had to be painted, we had a spray booth that we had sprayed everything with lacquer because lacquer dried quickly. And I worked there for quite a while before they enclosed that and put a big fan in. So you were responsible if you were to work in a window to gather all the materials that you were going to use, whatever decorations, if you were going to use trees or extra chairs or anything, all the bases of the mannequins. The mannequins always stood on a steel base, and that always had to be covered after, because you either used grass or in that was in mats, or we had like ground cork in different colors that we used artistically around the base of the mannequins. Yeah.
Did they have a place where everything was stored that you could go pull all of the things that you needed to put together a window?
Well, yes, but I don't think anyone could have found anything that hadn't been working there for quite some time, because it's chaos. Part of it is the transition between this stuff that you take out of a window and you don't get put away right away, and stuff that you have to retrieve to get another window ready. We had, the mannequins were sort of prima donnas in the department, I think because they were a big item in the budget. They were not cheap to have. So, and they got broken not pretty often, and otherwise need cosmetic care, because they had, every mannequin had their own little closet up there that you put them away in, and it was about this wide, and it had shelves in it because you had to take them apart. The mannequins come apart at the waist and the wrist and the shoulders. So all of the arms had to come off, and the hands had to come off, and the bottoms went in the bottom, and the torso went in the top. So you had to manipulate all that every time you took something back, or that you got it together to make a window out of it. So one of the biggest problems were the wigs, because the boys all thought it was fun to try them on, and which you can't do, because they were not like wigs that we wear now. They were stiff, and every mannequin had their own wig. You couldn't shift wigs around because their heads were positioned differently, so the wigs would fit differently. So we had to handle wigs with care.
Was there a person who designed the windows, or did you guys have leeway to decide what you wanted to do?
Mr. Kite, that was his prime responsibility, was to get all the materials together to decide what the department needed and what kind of decor they were going to use. If we had special something, Hawaiian or something special, then he was always the one that knew when those windows would go in and would order all the materials that he thought you needed. But he never did a drawn plan. It was according to who was doing the window. If he thought they were capable of designing, and sometimes he would say, what are you planning to do, to use? And you'd say, well, we're going to do this or that. And he'd make suggestions. But it was a very kind of, I wouldn't say catch as catch can, but It relaxed. It was a relaxed atmosphere
Like-
about design. It wasn't put this here and here and here.
Did you guys have like department meetings where you would sit down and discuss future designs or anything like that? Or was it all?
Never in 8 years.
No. And you were there 8 years. So when did you leave Wrens?
I left Wrens after I got married and was pregnant for my first child.
So what year was that?
Oh, gee. 1950, 51.
Okay.
1951, I guess, something like that. Yeah. And after that, I came in on a part-time basis from time to time we worked really hard at Christmas time because we did all the interior displays. And at that time, we put up everything on one night. So we had to wait till the store closed, and then we started climbing ladders and putting stuff up.
So everybody would come back to Christmas decor then, right?
Yes.
It's a one big.
Yes. Yeah.
Are there any memorable windows that you recall doing?
I think the one that I remember most, just what it looked like, one, because of its simplicity. And this was something that my boss had planned, during the war, because he knew that it was something. And so what we ended up in both of the huge windows, I say huge, but they were the largest windows in the store. On both windows, he had a huge replica of the world painted in, appropriate colors. And it was resting on clouds of fiberglass. You know fiberglass?
Like insulation?
Well, actually it did look, it was white and came in, it came sort of like cotton. And it had to be sort of pulled apart and fluffed around so it looked like clouds. But the problem was, it truly was spun glass. And it shed little microscopic pieces of glass which felt like nettles. I mean, on your skin when you worked with it. Afterwards, you felt it all around your body. So you hated it. Hated it. So now they use it to make bodies out of ships and cars. They don't use it for decorative purposes. But that a few years, people bought it. You bought it in like a mat and sort of peeled it apart. And they used it on Christmas trees for a few years. Not in my house.
So the rest of the display, so it was.
But and then it had big letters that said "Peace on Earth." Yeah, and that was the thing. It was just simple, and I thought it was very effective, but I hated it.
When did that one go up?
On VJ Day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was a crash course. Yeah, those are things happen quickly, but.
Do you remember that time? I remember seeing in the paper talking about all the celebrations downtown both on VE Day and VJ Day, stuff going on downtown.
Yes.
Do you recall?
I remember people, and of course it still reminds me of the pictures we still see of New York, and that's we had our Springfield had our own New York scene at VJ Day. Yeah, we did.
Do you have any other memories of working there? Anything in particular, stories or anything?
Well, I remember that I felt that I was at real advantage socially because the boys it's okay for me to call them boys because they were. We were 16, 17, 18 years old. And socially, the boys were wonderful. Nobody swore around me. Nobody tried to tell stories around me that would embarrass me, or I mean, they were gentlemen, you know. So we had, at that time, there was a dance every weekend at the YMCA called El Sam. And I never thought about it, what El Sam stood for, but it must have been sombrero, which makes no sense. But I don't. But anyway, that's where the kids from school usually, everybody went. We had live music, and I can't remember that. I should remember the band leader's name because it was the same band and it was good. But everybody went stag. I don't remember people going as, I can't even say people, children, you know, young people going as dates. You just went and then you looked up, see what it looked like, and if there's anyone there you wanted to dance with. And that's where I had the advantage because I worked with all these boys who felt comfortable, like, you know, sister-like. We were friends. And so they felt very comfortable asking me to dance because then we could discuss the girls that were there that they thought they really might like to dance with, which is okay with me because I didn't care. I liked to dance. So I felt that was an advantage to my social life.
And what year did you graduate from Springfield High School?
45.
45.
Yeah, yeah. Keep me on track because I do wander.
Okay, so we were talking about the
co-op
the co-op courses. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was why I ended up working at Wrens, was that you had to get a job before school started in September. So I had to find work in some place that they gave you a list of places that you could work at. And there was something that came in my mind. Well, I told you, yeah.
Did you walk to work then from school?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, but then, you know, Springfield High School then was only a few blocks from downtown.
Where did you live? Where did you grow up? What?
I lived every place. We were a family that moved often because not as many people owned their homes then as they do now. And so we moved often, and so I didn't live in one neighborhood, and I went to a lot of schools, yeah. So that's how I ended up working at Wrens, was that I could go to school half a day and work half a day because I wasn't that thrilled about school.
So what did you make throughout the years?
Well, only specifically I can tell you that after I left at 8 years, I made 80 cents an hour. Yeah.
You don't recall what you started at? Did
No.
Did you get raises throughout
It was less than that.
Less than that.
It was less than that. But we had perks. We had, during the war, you know, there were no nylon hose. And no one could get nylon hose at all. So when any came available, stores could not get their full allotment. They'd get a few. And at Wrens, they always offered them to the employees first. And so that was a big deal to buy nylon, except at that time, when I was 15, I didn't wear nylon. If I was tuned into the black market thing, I could have made a killing, but I wasn't smart enough at that time. And I had 2 sisters. So that took care of it. But there were perks. Yeah.
What was the access like to get into the windows?
A door made of glass with a lock on it, yeah.
Was it along the back or the sides of them?
On
Or
the big windows, we were out in, we called it the lobby, the atrium, we called it the lobby. There was just a part of the glasses on the back of the big window was the door. On the other access, we had to go through the hosiery department. There was on the back of their department, there was a door that went to the windows, and on the other side of the store, it was the blouse department you had to go through to get into it. But we had to haul everything down on, we called them trucks, which was just a platform with wheels and a pipe bar across that we fastened the mannequins to. And it was just big enough to fit into an elevator. So we had to bring everything down and unload everything on the floors or out in the lobby,
so how many people did you usually work with at a time to put together a window?
Oh, on a window, one or maybe two, yeah. And there were, I'd say maybe five or six people that worked worked in the department at one time, yeah. But some didn't work in the windows as much. We cut out all the letters or decor for particular things and generated our own displays from that rather than buying, store-bought stuff.
Are you familiar with the layout of the building currently? Have you been in the Bushnell building in a long time?
I have been through it, and I wanted more time to look at it to see what they've changed, which is everything. Because once they start putting up walls, it's difficult, or it is for me after 70 years, to say, now, was this wall here, or was this stairway here, or so on. But I haven't, except, the restaurant in the back is in the men's department.
In the Stella Blue, yeah. So, I think, it's 4 or 5 stories now? So
5.
It's 5? Okay. So I don't know, people that are familiar with the building now, there's different businesses and things in the building now. All of that was Wrens then? All of the floors, everything
yes.
was
Yes.
Wrens? There wasn't anything else that was using the same building?
Well, the Fountain Avenue entrance now, they use that. Before that was, although you could, from the main floor, you could go down the steps to the cafeteria. But there was also an outdoor entrance to the cafeteria right there where the steps are that go down.
Yeah, there's a door right now that goes directly upstairs, because that's how we used to go to Gary Geist's dance studio, I think, which was on the 2nd or 3rd floor. I can't remember now.
Well, what's funny about that, I think is funny, is because we had an elevator that went right up to the display department. From that, as you come in that entrance and you go up a few steps, the elevator was right there on the right. Nobody used it but the display department. And the entrance to the steps that go up was completely walled in. So you couldn't, and those steps, beautiful balustrades and steps, marble steps, went clear up to the 5th floor. But in our department, on the 5th floor, you couldn't go down the steps. The steps were full of debris. I mean, they were never used.
You had to take the elevator.
You had to take the elevator if you wanted to go down
So you guys were all the way up on the 5th floor,
Yeah.
and all of your work was down on the 1st
Of
floor.
course, of
Yeah.
course, yeah.
So the windows that face Fountain now over by Stella Blue, those are those how the windows were set up then?
They are.
Yeah.
And that pleases me. It's the only windows
That are still there. I was gonna
intact.
say everything on Main is completely
Yes.
gone. Yeah.
Yeah. Except the big window. No, that's changed too. Now they changed the architecture so that it's hard for me to tell. But of course, the big windows that we trimmed that were supposed to be the important windows were freestanding. They weren't connected to the building.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they would have been further out onto like where the sidewalk is now?
Yeah,
Yeah.
they were right on the sidewalk. I mean, they were right there. So they were, and then we just had the 2 revolving doors that went in off of the lobby that went into the main store. The worst job that we had was, here's 2 revolving doors or circles. Well, between those circles, in the lobby and in the store sides, was a little triangular window. You can imagine what shape it was if you put 2 circles together, and you've got that little area like that. Okay, those were windows, little windows with like 4 shelves on, glass. All the shelves were glass. Well, the glass got broken off them because they were just on little metal things that held them. And the glass cutters never cut the circle that was the revolving doors. They cut straight lines. So which means the shelves fell. I mean, if you shifted them wrong and they didn't hit, and then they broke everything that was below them. We hated when we had to trim those. And we put things like perfumes and gloves and things that were pretty static because we didn't do it every week.
Would they charge you if stuff was damaged in a window? You didn't have to worry about that. That's good.
No. Well, and you know, they used really heavy glass for those shelves. And the thing was, you stood there while people are coming in on both sides of you in the revolving doors, standing there trying to get the merchandise out and get the merchandise in.
And people are going around you.
So you learned a lot of things. And no formal training. No, okay, this is what you do. You went with whoever, well, this is what I did, and I think everybody coming in did the same. You just went with someone that knew what they were doing and observed and did what they told you to do until you learned what you were supposed to do.
Did they ever hire any other women in the department besides you?
Before I left, and I knew my husband then was going to go to Kent State to get his master's. So I was going, and we were going to live up in Akron for that year. So when I told my boss that I was going to do that, he hired another girl. And I worked with her for a while before I left, yeah. So he kept a woman in the department for as long as he was there.
Well, that's good. And you said you didn't get to work in any window departments when you were up in Akron, though.
No, and I tried to. And I mean, I went to the department stores, and but there weren't any women up there working in the windows. So I got a job in a plastic factory, and that's not a good place to work.
Well, apparently we were more progressive down here, that they hired women for the window department.
I felt that was true, but Akron had some very very nice stores, yeah. And my boss gave me good recommendations, you know, to take up, but they really weren't interested in someone from Springfield. A woman.
They missed out.
They did. They did.
So, is there anything else that you wanted to share you can think of?
Well, since I forgot my notes, I don't think that I have forgotten anything. You've been very helpful in asking me, because there are things that I know I'll remember later. Say,
Well,
I
you
could
know
have shared
you
that."
know where we are. You can call me.
And vice versa. You
Yeah.
know where I am. Yes.
Well, thank you for sitting down with us to talk about this.
Well, thank you for listening.
Yeah. All right.